Thank you all for joining. Today is going to be a really exciting talk. We are covering if ETH is for DeFi Degens or digital oil. It might be one, it might be other, it might be all of the above. But that's what we're here to find out. And I just want to say thanks to everyone for joining our second episode. I think we have a really diverse panel of speakers, and I think we're really going to get some really good conversation out of today. So I think let's get started with the intros. Alon, do you mind taking it away? Just some background, project, and what you guys are, what we're busy with at the moment.
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm Alon. I'm the CEO of SSV Labs. We are on the core team behind SSV Network. And we primarily focus on building essential infrastructure for Ethereum. SSV Network is the second largest staking protocol for Ethereum with just over 4 million ETH at stake. And we are now seeing and exploring ways for the validators of Ethereum to help scale and consolidate the different rollups that are on Ethereum today with a new technology called synchronous composability.
Very cool. Very cool. I think composability is definitely one of the big talking points of today. Thanks for the intro, Alon. AJ?
Yep. Hi, this is AJ, founder of Radius. Thanks for the invite. Radius is building sequencing infra for rollups, especially to help them to find additional revenue source by like extracting good MEV, 6x arbitrage, or even cross-chain MEV stuff. So great to be here.
Awesome. Thank you. And Forrest, how about yourself?
Yeah, thank you, Robert. Hey guys, I'm Forrest. I lead business development and growth things over at Conduit. We are a blockchain infrastructure platform that made our name over the last couple of years, helping people launch their own rollups. So to date, we've helped over 50 teams launch their own rollups on top of Ethereum, exploring really the whole design and surface area for building your own chain on top of Ethereum, whether it's really, really deep customizations for high performance networks or permissioned environments for enterprises, or really, kind of everything under the sun. So excited to chat today about rollups at Ethereum and the ways that they cross over.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you so much, guys. We are just getting Orest on. So I think maybe let's just give a moment for that. But in the meantime, guys, what do you think about Google announcing the L1? Any takers?
It's a big mistake to become an L1.
Love it.
No, I mean, seriously, I think that's they'll find it very, very difficult. I mean, obviously, Coinbase had the reach for many, many developers, but I think that there's so much work and things involved in building an own L1 versus the benefits of just launching an L2. I don't know. I think that they're shooting themselves in the legs a bit, but who knows?
Interesting. Sorry, go for it.
No, I was just going to say, I'd say by company Google's size and with their standards, I'd say a somewhat sloppy way to reveal this, which makes me think that with just a LinkedIn post, which makes me think that it's not actually a major initiative for them. It's probably more of like an innovation lab or like small internal team that's been working on this. I think I generally agree with that Alon outlined. It's probably a mistake. We've seen a lot of failures of these kind of enterprise L1 permissioned environments by big corporations. And I think there's always just been the question of, they don't really, I think they kind of have the worst of both worlds. They don't necessarily have the crypto side and go to market figured out, and real crypto developers who are in, like some of the ones in this call, who are really interested in actually building things on chain, obviously like don't give it a second look. I think that's why they're targeting a non-standard VM and architecture. It sounds like smart contracts will be written in Python, so they're really going for something very different from a lot of the blockchains that we've seen today. So I'd love. I think it's maybe good news. Maybe it'll be interesting. I think it is probably dead on arrival, like a lot of these initiatives.
Yeah, I think it's a good point. It was a very lackluster kind of launch. But I see we have Orest on. Orest, welcome, good sir. It's nice to have
Yeah,
you.
can you guys hear me all right?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Oh, great. So sorry about the technical trouble.
No
Yeah,
worries.
I'm Orest. So it's going to be quite confusing with the Forrest being on the same call. I hope we are going to make it. And so cool to see a Forrest, because I usually intro myself as Forrest without the F, so people know how to spell my name. So yeah, Forrest, really pleased to be here with you. And yeah, thank you guys for having me. I'm a co-founder and CTO at T1. At T1, we are trying to fix the rollup fragmentation issue that we deem is currently making the broader Ethereum ecosystem suffer a lot. And the genesis of this is basically the desire of the Ethereum L1 to have, the desire to have scale that resulted in rollups. Myself, previously, I was working on shipping Scroll, a ZK rollup, only to realize that whilst ZK is amazing, the generation times still create a latency as high as though to basically result in islands and silos of isolated liquidity, isolated users, isolated dApps that are the L2s as we know them today. And so in order to fix that, at T1, we are trying to use a more hybrid approach, leaning on TEEs and crypto economic security next to just ZK in order to bring about a real-time composability across the rollup ecosystem.
Amazing. I think, like I said, composability is like a very big topic of discussion right now. I think especially for everyone involved. So I think let's hit it off. So I think throughout the years, Ethereum has had multiple narratives and multiple reasons to hold ETH, but also why is it important? And I think we had DeFi, and I feel like we are now kind of moving into like a more institutional kind of narrative. And I'm wondering, like, Ethereum has many dual narratives, and what do you guys think is the way to speak about Ethereum as all these different kinds of things, or like we said in the title, is ETH a DeFi playground or is it essential infrastructure? I guess it depends on who you talk to. So just to set the narrative of this talk, what is your guys' opinion on this? I see Orest. Okay, go for it.
Yeah, I mean, we are now seeing this very particular moment of price action just happening to be more on the positive than the negative for people who long. And so it's easy to come and think, well, something happened, so it goes up. And I think what is important in the mid and long term, at least that is something that brought and keeps me in the space, is building with some notion of first principles in mind and fundamentals and value creation. And yet, I think as an Ethereum ecosystem, we've basically overfitted on this extreme for the first, I would say, 8 years, until the rollup centric roadmap actually started like being shipped. And I think now we are calibrating, and I think it's important during this calibration to not completely overfit to the other extreme and become this like super valueless ecosystem or community, because we will, as a community again, risk losing some of the appeal and some of the long-term staying power that many people care about, and that ultimately, and I want to hope and believe, leads to value creation that is reflected or reflectable in a token that accrues value.
100%. AJ, I saw you, or Alon. Sorry, bro.
Yeah, I go ahead, AJ.
Thanks. Okay. So actually, when Ethereum first came out, it was really like a kind of a crypto playground. So like the degens were farming yields in DeFi, like launching ICOs, minting NFT, those kind of things. But that early chaos is kind of I believe that a part of what shaped today's ecosystem DNA. So, but now it's kind of a completely different stage. So we are talking like a global financial institutions tokenizing RWAs, cross-border settlement systems, and some even governments saying that if we put some data on Ethereum, it's safe. So Ethereum has turned into like a digital infrastructure. Actually, I felt that shift in person at Ethereum NYC's next Fin events a couple of weeks ago. So some panel said with the Genius Act passed and the Clarity Act on the way, for Web2s and institutional players connecting to Ethereum, feels like the first time they used ChatGPT. So the point is that regularity clarity is coming, and then the ambiguity is lifting, and now the environment is ready for like $1 trillion capital flows into crypto, especially Ethereum. But what the flip side on the surface, it's open, but under the hood, the critical value flows, block building revenue, MEV or OFA auctions, those kind of things still happen through like private channels. So who gets what, why, and it's kind of it isn't visible. So like here's some question I'd like to ask: like, can Ethereum become infrastructure trusted by billions if these flows aren't visible? I don't think. I don't think so. So that's why we are kind of designing systems to make these hidden economics transparent, so growth and trust compound together. So to sum up, transparency has to be the default for Ethereum to be truly global public infrastructure.
I definitely agree, and it's also an interesting point to bring up is like you have the transparent side of the blockchain, but then if you're a business or if you're like a multi-billion-dollar entity that wants to build on Ethereum, you also need that privacy. And I think that's where ZK comes in, and we'll definitely dive into that later. Alon, can we get back to you?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I'm not entirely sure it's this or both. I mean, ultimately, Ethereum has very different layers to it. There's the infrastructural layer where there's a lot of talent building the best infrastructure possible for blockchain, and there's many layers of building different different applications. I mean, even what we're seeing today with the institutional the treasury companies, it's an application of Ethereum, right? It's a financial application of Ethereum in a very different than what we saw till now, but nonetheless a financial application. So there's many things happening, and Ethereum is the days where Ethereum was one thing are long gone. Ethereum is many things. And I think we need to, but it all stems from the infrastructure. I think that one of the unique value props of Ethereum is this um, innovation, which puts the right trade-off between decentralization, credible neutrality, censorship resistance, but also with actually developing things and moving the protocol along. I think that's kind of the value prop. And so I think I would want to see more of that happening. But also, as I said many times in the past, I think we need to be more proactive in competing on developers and use cases. It's not we cannot take a just a passive approach to they will come if we build it.
I think I love what Alon said just on it's not one thing anymore, and it's completely evolved in the last we've already hit a decade of Ethereum at this point. I think over the summer. So we now have, the simplest way to describe it is it's by far the biggest blockchain ecosystem and economy, and it's not even close when you account for all of the different companies, organizations, individuals, contributors who all have different incentives and motivations for wanting to work on this. And when you measure the success of not only Ethereum, the asset, but the EVM, ERC20 token standard, these things are completely dominant in proliferating the market. But the job is not finished. It's certainly not won. But I think what makes me very excited about Ethereum, kind of the changes in the last, 6 to 9 months, are we kind of have this new dual mandate of we're going to continue to explore the roll-up centric roadmap and have a massive ecosystem of federated chains for companies that want to connect to Ethereum, but maybe own their own block space or be able to capture MEV within their ecosystem and their applications, and we can have a federated model of chains that are connected to Ethereum and aligned with Ethereum. And we can also scale the L1 and continue to push the L1 as an execution layer. That's where your global assets should be, on-chain assets should be issued. So I think Ethereum's new dual mandate from the last 6 to 9 months is very good, because I think it settles maybe some of the arguments and misalignment that we had in the last couple of years, where you had opinionated core developers who wanted to focus on the L1. You had lots of major ecosystems and brands that wanted more scalability and security for L2s. And now that we have a dual mandate, it's very easy for everyone to kind of sit down and focus on the things in front of them.
Very cool. Completely agreed. I think L2s now have really opened up the space for people to join. Yes, Orest.
I tend to agree on this starting point level, but it kind of does sound like a deja vu from 3 years ago, where the idea was, hey, let us have those L2s that maybe cater to specific needs, and the Arbitrum version of the EVM will have this one precompile, and the Optimism EVM version will be suited to this and that set of special purposes. It didn't happen. And what happened instead is that we now have this terrible user experience that some of us who've been in the ecosystem for a while might have become blind towards, but that manifests once you ask your mom or your brother who hasn't transacted in crypto to do something, and they are faced with bridging, and they are faced with gas and this other L2, and then they are having smart accounts that are not existent under the same address, and all of those things. And also, are we faced with a situation where this very promise of a blockchain being able to give this new no-name young developer the ability to tap into a pre-existing dApp, a pre-existing set of users or liquidity, and therefore create something that's bigger than the sum of its parts. It basically led instead to a fragmentation where the user needs to manually go ahead and look, hey, is the APY on lending USDC high on base today or on Arbitrum? Do I need to move? And it defeats the purpose of this Lego building block idea that made Ethereum so successful in the first place. So I think it's not without caveats what we are seeing in terms of, hey, roll-up centric roadmap, and let's have people focus on what they're good at.
I 100% agree, and I think you're segueing us beautifully into the next kind of section, which is, or we just we see rollups are doing a lot more, but the fragmentation is really an issue. And now, to kind of solve this fragmentation, you have rollup networks, which is essentially just perpetuating the problem. So how are we looking at interoperability and composability? Well, we all know how important it is, but not just inter L2, but I mean for L2 networks as a whole. I think let Alon take this one.
Yeah, I think that we have a huge gaping hole, and we're basically at the stage where we're putting band-aids on it. So I think the current interop solutions are either very limited or very slow. We have nothing that does, that offers fast and really flexible interop. So we either have intent-based interop, which is from the user experience, has great user experience, but it's very, very limited because it's liquidity-based. Or we have message passing, which is very flexible but painfully slow. And it seems to me that both of them have great value, but they're not really at this. The technology itself is not there to actually solve the fragmentation as we see it. So if I need to kind of envision the dream of what is a great interop between Ethereum and its rollup, is basically you need to conserve or maintain the same level of UX as you have on Ethereum today, in terms of transactions are atomic, composable, synchronous, not asynchronous, but you still want to have it in a cheap way. So you still want to have the benefit of cheap transactions on L2s. And so the only real path forward, I think, is to really adopt the concept of synchronous composability as this thing that connects Ethereum and its rollups, and obviously rollup to rollup. But also, there's a much bigger picture here. It's not just about UX, because ultimately it's about what will the scaling of Ethereum look like? Is it basically going to be, 2 or 3 mega brands running rollups, and they are basically the extension of Ethereum that scales? Because if that's the case, I think the rollup centric roadmap will be a failure. We're not building this whole thing just to have to generate additional rewards and revenue for Coinbase and Robinhood. So I think the vision of having hundreds of and even thousands of different rollups, each one of them doing different things, the same way we have tokens, I think this is the right vision for Ethereum. Again, it doesn't mean that each one of them will have an equal part of the transaction volume, but for the very least, massive competition between them. And for us to do that, we have to be able to have seamless UX, because otherwise you can't really have hundreds and thousands of rollups. That's why we're now seeing that, for the most part, most activity on rollups is concentrated around 2 or 3 rollups, and basically everyone else fights for scraps. And one of the main reasons is really because there's a massive network effect for bigger rollups, meaning that if you are a big rollup and you continue to grow, at some point you'll have this escape velocity where nobody can touch you. And today we're seeing that. So today it's very easy to launch a rollup. We have Conduit here, and you can literally do it in 5 minutes probably on their platform and other platforms as well. But the problem is not launching a rollup anymore. The problem is, how do you make it sustainable, profitable, successful? And I think to that end, composability plays a major role, because then it really means that rollups can compete with one another, rollups can offer different value props, and the UX is not degraded as a result of that. And so I'm a big believer that we've probably took what we could from things like intent and message passing based in interrupts, and we need to move to this next stage where we harness new technologies like ZK and sync composability to really offer next level UX.
Cool. Orest, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, so Alon sounds just like Justin Drake. And I think this is contradictory. I think you can't have at the same time the ambition, this aspiration of the original Ethereum ethos of having a large distributed validator set, and at the same time crave for having all rollups be synchronously composable with each other in DL1. I think this doesn't make sense, and I'm happy to expand why. But also, I don't want us, again, as a community, to be bound and only as ambitious as though to try and keep the Ethereum mainnet UX. I think it's not great UX. I do agree that having Ethereum plus rollups is even worse of a UX. But even just Ethereum, like that's something that is a sign of an early, immature technical product, in my opinion. There's so many things that can be improved, even on the wallet level, to make user experience so much better. We should not aspire to maintain Ethereum mainnet level UX. We should aspire to improve it. Now, why does
wallet level UX is outside of the core of Ethereum. I'm talking mostly about the infrastructure of Ethereum, less about its applications. I mean, you can always improve wallets, and there's definitely a lot of improvement there. But that's outside of the core of Ethereum.
True, and there is also interdependency. So, for instance, this fast confirmation rule idea that has been passed around on Ethereum Magician for a year now, and has like a pull request open in Nimbus for, I guess, 6 months, is something that would make creating a wallet that gives you a very fast confidence about the block that contains the transaction becoming finalized a lot easier without having this in protocol, or at least without having some sort of repo and reference implementation for like for instance fast finality. It's just a lot less efficient and even more unlikely for wallets to adopt standards like these. And
But
then there's a
actually,
lot
you
more
do.
that needs to be done on top on the protocol level itself, such as three-slot finality and shorter block times.
But you do have really great UX or snappy UX on the leading rollups. So, for example, today with pre-confirmations or more maturely the flash blocks, you basically have 200 millisecond really crisp UX responsiveness from the blockchain.
Yeah, and your wallet does not even show you whether the rollup posted its DA to DL1, let alone if the block
yeah.
transaction finalized. Like, this is early. This is like, trust me, bro.
Yeah, definitely. But I think this is kind of I don't know if I want to use this terminology, but it's kind of like a web of trust, right? Because you ultimately use a specific wallet and you trust that wallet. I don't think we can escape that. Ultimately, users want to users want to trust the service they're using, and it's not a bad thing. I mean, ultimately, you gain your reputation by doing things correctly and gain people's trust, but I think that there's again with Ethereum, it's always about the layers on top, right? So, it's I think at least on my end, I'm always concerned about what does the underlying protocol enables you or prevents you from doing, right? So you have things like account abstraction, which of course now you had the 7702 coming into the latest fork and so on, but it's not really something that prevents you from doing account abstraction. Account abstraction is slowly gaining traction, not because of protocol limitations, but just because it didn't prove itself yet as something that people absolutely need. And maybe it will change. But I think that we need to distinguish between things that the protocol prevents you from doing. So, for example, if you want to have very snappy transactions on Ethereum, obviously 12-second blocks is not something that is um, um, modern anymore. I mean, I always tell people, try to make a transaction for people who have been on Ethereum for very long and didn't transact on Bitcoin lately. Try to go and make a transaction on Bitcoin. You'll be horrified to needing to wait for 30, 50 minutes for confirmation of your transaction. And so things getting better on that regard, right? I mean, and now 12 seconds on Ethereum seems very long, even though 5 years ago when the Bitcoin chain was launched, 12 seconds seemed good. But rollups now have this 200 millisecond transaction, so we are getting there. The problem is that I think that we are getting there in a way that is kind of slicing up Ethereum in various islands of economic kind of independence. Right. So if you want to have snappy transactions, you'll have to go to Coinbase, which is not really Ethereum anymore.
But if you want to have security, you'll have to go to Ethereum. But so we need to somehow bridge those gaps, because if we continue this path, ultimately most users will not be on Ethereum anymore. And that's I think a really bad outcome of the rollup centric roadmap.
Sure. I think you guys unpacked a lot of interesting things here. And I also think, I think from like Conduit, like Forrest, what is your perspective from like deploying and maintaining like multiple rollups? What is your opinion on this?
Yeah, I think I'm always going to take the pragmatic view on these things, because we see the strides being made on the rollup ecosystem day to day and hour to hour, having worked with these technologies for years. So I think that I don't know that it's a, let me say that I think we have to be comfortable with massive companies and organizations and projects with lots of distribution wanting to verticalize themselves and wanting to make more revenue. And we have to understand that we've spent the last 10 years building lots of open source technology that the Coinbases and the Robinhoods and other public companies are going to come in and are going to recycle for their own purposes. That's been the story of the web since it began. So this isn't unique to crypto. It's a problem of maybe public goods funding, right? And funding open source software. But we've spent a decade building a lot of tooling and a lot of really powerful technology. And now massive organizations are going to go use it and make a lot of money with it. We have to be comfortable with this. We have to be comfortable with them verticalizing. I would argue, even in their state today, where their decentralization and verifiability are still trying to progress and are not to the final stages where we want them. Teams doing this on rollups, settling on Ethereum, marrying the EVM and the ERC20 token standard and all of the things that come with it is objectively very, very important for the health and long-term strategy of Ethereum, and much better than losing teams to another ecosystem. So I understand that synchronous composability, if I could snap my fingers and we have it today, great, I would snap my fingers right now. But there are a lot of trade-offs that come with that. Some of the applications that exist on L2s simply would not exist even on L1s. Part of one of the big advantages of rollups is we don't actually have to worry about consensus. We can ultimately have a single big box, a single sequencer that's giving fast confirmations to transactions. And then we have a proving system that can keep the sequencer honest, and everyone can still verify their honesty and integrity and ordering of those transactions. That's the real power of rollups at the end of the day. And this simply isn't powerful on an L1 where you're ultimately bottlenecked by consensus. And so when we want these, 200 milliseconds, maybe fast by crypto standards, I would argue we have to get closer to 10 milliseconds as fast as possible to really open up like the full spectrum of financial use cases and get to parity with off-chain systems and latencies. I think that's where rollups are going to continue to shine. Even the fastest L1s are going to struggle to remain stable or provision enough infrastructure to keep up with those speeds. And as for like maybe the ETH alignment bit or failure of the rollup centric roadmap, like I think we do the people tend to do the thing where you overestimate what can be accomplished in 1 year, but you underestimate what can be accomplished in like 5 to 10 years. So if I compare the rollups of 2025 to the rollup landscape in 2020, we've made massive strides. We've made these significantly cheaper, faster, better, and safer on every single dimension. And not only do we have, kind of the start of the industry was these major technology providers and companies that literally spent hundreds of millions of dollars doing R&D and running these things. So the companies like Arbitrum, Optimism, Starkware, ZK Sync, Polygon, others who were early adopters here spent collectively billions on R&D so that now massive brands can come in and leverage their technologies to maybe launch their own. So I think we have to be comfortable with that and understand the motivations of when a company like Robinhood wants to come in and connect to really bring their business on chain, I think is the way they think about it from first principles. And then they have a pretty objective lens and they decide that actually for a fully vertically integrated on-chain business, building a rollup on top of Ethereum gives them maximum control, but also keeps them aligned with an on-chain community that it doesn't scare them off, right? The amount of control or security or sovereignty that Robinhood wants by building on this, right? We already accept Base as maybe the most used rollup today. So I think we have to be comfortable with these types of trade-offs. I think that I wouldn't attribute to the power laws of rollup usage today to lack of composability, and instead I would contribute them more to natural network effects and distribution. So I guess that's my perspective here.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to be heard as if I'm trashing Coinbase or others. I think they're incredibly instrumental to the maturity of rollups as the kind of the go-to path for Ethereum, and in general, I think they also gave way to this business model around rollups. I do think that one of the interesting things that happened in crypto along the the last 10 years is that we've managed to create alternatives, and those alternatives ultimately came together to create a more powerful ecosystem. If you look at, for example, trading, obviously the first use cases were the big exchanges, right? I mean, obviously some of them are not existing anymore today, but Coinbase was created back then, and Binance a bit younger. But obviously the first use cases for trading crypto were centralized exchanges. But then came entrepreneurs and created DEXs. And really the killer feature of DEXs was composability. DEXs at the beginning were really shitty. They didn't work well. There was really two main milestones that make trading DEXs so powerful. One is the tokenization or giving rewards in tokens based on liquidity. That really kicked off Uniswap and SushiSwap back in the day, and others, but also composability, the idea that you can, with zero coordination, take a Uniswap liquidity pool and use it from other protocols. I think that really scaled DeFi to what we're seeing today. So it's not this or the other. It's more about different types of products. I do think that the Coinbase rollups of the world are similar to the centralized exchanges of the world, but I do think there's a lot of space for the decentralized version of that, which ultimately will just create more value to the centralized ones as well in the future. And I think it goes through having thousands of rollups composable with one another. Potentially in the future, Coinbase will join this web of composability, but it's not this or that. I think both of those things have to coexist in order for this to flourish.
100%. I really like that. And I think something that I'm hearing now coming is very much like, how do we align incentives of the L2s and the L1, to kind of keep the Ethereum ethos going, but also to not let Ethereum die. And, I think there are many things that play a role, but I think I want to direct this question to AJ. And how do you think we align the L1 and the L2 in this kind of way, in terms of value, perhaps, and value both ways?
I think it's a good question. I think I do want to note that, like, and this is where I maybe deviate from some of the core developers and Ethereum community the most, is I definitely don't think that Ethereum should be max extracting from rollups today. And so when we have proposals where we look at the revenues that Base is making and Arbitrum are making, and then we look at the settlement fees and DA fees that they pay to Ethereum L1, and we say, oh my gosh, there's a big margin for them, we should eat into that margin more. I think that's thinking about it the wrong way and turning value capture on far too early for Ethereum, the platform. And so I think there are some interesting initiatives being done on how you can marry these things. Ultimately, I think what matters is asset issuance, and what seems to, for the most part, for like very serious tokens and assets, we still encourage, and I think even the major rollup teams, I don't want to speak for them, but I think they still encourage teams to go out and issue assets on Ethereum L1 first. So it's an Ethereum native asset. And then if you want to go take it to Base or Arbitrum 1 or roll up XYZ, you have the ability to do that from the L1, but the main ledger of account for the token itself is the Ethereum L1. So I think Ethereum is like the ultimate asset ledger and settlement layer is pretty important. And if we're wanting to keep rollups Ethereum aligned, I think keeping asset issuance on the L1 rather than going L2 native is probably an important thing for the ecosystem to encourage. Secondly, I think there are interesting ways that rollups can actually be involved in L1 DeFi. I think Polygon and Blast have innovated with this, where you can, if users are kind of comfortable with the risks of rehypothecation, then you can actually deposit some of the assets in a rollup bridge into L1 DeFi. That way you still keep a lot of liquidity and you're contributing to the DeFi ecosystem on the L1. And these massive vats of billions of dollars of stable coins and liquid digital assets. And you still have the minted version on the rollup that a user can go use and seamlessly go do fast transactions on the L2, withdraw, and then maybe they've even made some yield there. So I think it looks a little bit more like a bank that's lending out your assets, and it's closer to fractional reserve banking. But I think that's an interesting strategy that we're already seeing some of the major players try as well, to keep an L2 contributing in some positive some way to the L1.
Nice. I don't know if Orest, are you with us still? Otherwise, Alon, I don't know if you
Yeah,
feel like.
I
There we
am.
go.
I disagree on like 99 points with Alan, but I do agree on the one point that there is some good to be had from having basically this pressure stemming from the original Ethereum ethos eventually propagate into the centralized world, and in the ideal in the ideal scenario end up rendering the centralized service actually less centralized, or more trustworthy, more verifiable.
I see. I see. We've like, if we're thinking about mass adoption, like, do we think that if we can have that level of like hundreds of millions of users on Ethereum, is it then, you don't necessarily want a monopoly, or are we looking for perfect competition? Does that even exist? So I think it's an interesting economic dynamic to see it play out. Anyone keen to like jump on that?
You mean between Ethereum and other chains, or between rollup to Ethereum?
I think Ethereum and other chains. So
No, I think it's a done deal. I mean, Ethereum has
How so?
Sorry?
How so?
I think the innovation engine behind Ethereum is too strong. I mean, it's not to say that there's no space for other chains, but I think there's a network effect that is very hard to match with Ethereum. It's the standards of Ethereum and others. I think that especially with the roll-up business model, not enough people talk about the business model behind rollups. The idea that you can create your own tiny Ethereum, or not tiny, but like a mini ecosystem of Ethereum, and you control the infrastructure, I think is the business model of the future. It's basically answering a huge question and competition point that it's been for many years now, which is block production. Who is controlling block production? And up until this point, the answer was the L1. And now the answer is no, it can actually be the L2. And so you drive value back to Ethereum. But again, I think it's being part of a greater network. And so you can enjoy a lot of the tools and liquidity and user base of Ethereum, provided that you can create better composability. If you can create composability, that's actually going to just become, I think, what we're seeing still today, which is most of the money is still of Ethereum. because people are, still trust Ethereum more than they trust their rollups. And so, but yeah, so I think it's a done deal.
Forrest, anyone else take the mantle?
Sure. I think agree with a lot of what Alon outlined. I think I would say like Ethereum has a large lead, but it's we had multiple years of maybe trying to hook on ourselves in multiple different areas, and so I think to not blow the lead, what we have to do is ensure that Ethereum and its broader ecosystem is still the best place to build both the solo developer and individual developer project, as well as like the massive on-chain business that's moving on-chain. Those different types of profiles have different incentives and different things that they're looking for. But if you're able to cater to those two types of people out there in this world, then I think Ethereum will continue to succeed. I do think that what we've learned from other Altel ones is to double down on what's winning. I think Ethereum, because we had kind of such this like infinite garden mentality for so many years, we were never focused on one specific use case. I think the like I remember like kind of post 2020, there was a lot of criticism of the Ethereum Foundation for not really embracing DeFi to the degree that they could have. And I think that Ethereum is now very much doubling down on like the two blockchain core use cases, which are stablecoin digital dollar payments anywhere in the world, and also speculation and permissionless asset issuance and permissionless trading of assets anywhere in the world. And I think Ethereum is now really acknowledging and hyper focusing around those core use cases, rather than maybe shunning them or ignoring them or trying to promote ones that are more aligned with the foundation's like morals or ethics or what have you. So I think as long as Ethereum continues to double down on those two blockchain core use cases and continues to be a great place to build an on-chain business for both organizations big and small, it will continue to hold its lead and grow.
Nice. I think
So I'm sorry to disappoint, but already last year, Solana had more new developers than Ethereum. It's not that Ethereum needs to keep its lead. It's that it's already lost it in attracting newcomers.
I'm sorry. It depends on how you count those developers. It reminds me of the EOS discussions back in the day. You can count developers the way you count, anything else. It very much depends on how you do that and so on.
Of course, but it's not
very subjective.
anymore this clear, hey, Ethereum is the obvious winner situation. And I think this is a big risk. And I think this infinite garden approach had not exactly been the most successful at preventing Ethereum from losing its lead, or at least from losing its margin, its buffer of being a lead.
I definitely think there's a lot of competition out there. That's not to say that it's not the case, but I think that there's a value for Ethereum that a lot of people are looking for. And by the way, we're seeing it with Bitcoin as well, which is the idea that you can own part of Ethereum, and Ethereum is unopinionated about what you're doing, which is very different than what's happening on other chains. You cannot own part of Solana because VCs own it. And Solana is very opinionated about what it wants to be, and Ethereum is not. And by the way, in that sense, Bitcoin is not either. I mean, people like the idea that Bitcoin doesn't belong to anyone. Even give an example, right? There's a huge run now between treasury companies to own a certain percentage of Ethereum, right? You cannot imagine doing that on Solana because somebody else will own you. Because Solana was built from the ground up as a VC or a VC company that VC invested in. And so I think that's one of the magic points of Ethereum. And I think that's why it's so differentiated from others. But it's not to say that it's competition, because it definitely is. We need to make sure that we are up to standard with. And I think, by the way, the biggest difference is not necessarily technological, it's just the focus. Solana is really good at supporting developers, and Ethereum Foundation is not. And I think that needs to change, but it's not so much a tech problem. It's more of a focus and strategy problem.
Yeah, I think like as we close this out, it's also good to remember that like Ethereum is also more than DeFi, and it's not to say that other chains aren't doing their own things as well. But I think DeFi was kind of the thing that got Ethereum off the ground and IPOs and all of that. But I think as time's also moved on, we've built DeSci and a lot of like really important primitives for people to start using the blockchain in different ways. So I think like DeSci is probably one of my favorite examples. But I Ethereum definitely goes way beyond just the financial. Where you're actually able to have a financial aspect of a company where you could potentially fund medicine and things like that. I think these kinds of initiatives also bring Ethereum to a different kind of level in terms of what humans can do on the blockchain instead of just money.
So
How is
I want
an
to give just
Ethereum blockchain helpful?
I just want to give a last example, which I think is critical. The fact that the biggest, more successful project on Solana wants to become its own L1, I think says a lot. Now, it doesn't mean that it doesn't happen on Ethereum, right? You can say Circle does the same now. But it tells me that behind the scenes, Pump.Fun, being as big, receives nothing out of Solana, other than just block space. If they're willing so easily to leave Solana, it's because the only thing that Solana gives them is fast block times. And fast block times, anyone can recreate them. And I think that's a really big indicator and a really bad one for Solana in general.
Isn't block space what a blockchain sells?
No,
And
no,
fast
no, 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 no.
fast block times a particular attractive block
Blockchain
space?
sells. No,
Come on, we are not selling a value set here, right?
you're selling an ecosystem which provides block space. If the only thing you're selling is literally the space on a block, I can fork out any blockchain you want and sell you the same thing cheaper. The thing that you're selling is not just any block space; it's a block space on a specific network. And but it seems that Pump.Fun doesn't have that value from Solana. They literally just receive space in a block, and it's a very different value proposition.
Well, obviously, they could have launched on Google Cloud Platform, right? They obviously care about the fact that Solana's block space is less centralized than GCP.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is that Solana doesn't have network effects for them. I'll give you an example, right? It's like saying, you're making phone calls, so why do you care if you're using iPhone or Android? But we know we care, right? There's value in iPhone and there's value in Android, and there's very different values to it. So they're very different focuses. And it's not just about making phone calls, because it's not like I can, T-Mobile can say tomorrow, you know what, people don't care about anything else. They just want to make phone calls or use the internet. I'll build them their own phone, right? They can't really do that because of the network effects iPhone or Apple and Android have. What Pump.Fun said was it's the equivalent of T-Mobile creating their own phone. They basically said, look, there's nothing else other than block space that Solana offers me. And so I'll simply fork out my favorite blockchain stack, and I'll do my own block space. And I think that's a really bad thing for Solana. If they're by far their biggest app does that.
Nice. I really, really love having opposite kind of views, and I think it really helps us kind of expand this conversation forward, because we really are hearing like really good, real world, examples. I was like, Forrest, do you have anything to contribute to this, as we start closing out the conversation?
I mean, a lot of good points being made on both sides. I don't know that I have too much to add from some of the things I shared earlier. I would tend to be on the side, again, of just victory's not assured. There's a lot of work to be done. I think Ethereum lost ground and lost market share pretty clearly from 2022 to early 2025. And I think that there's a lot of work to be done on both L1 scaling and L2 scaling to try and gain that market share back, continue to make Ethereum the most exciting, fastest growing blockchain ecosystem. And I do think that while I love the fact that Ethereum has broader ambitions beyond just blockchains or for finance, I think it's the most important application. And I think it's important that Ethereum double down on that and really break it, and really double down and own being the blockchain for finance around the world. I think people follow their assets and tend to kind of vote with their wallets, and if their money and assets all start moving on chain, I think the rest of their lives and other really interesting applications will follow.
Awesome. Thank you for the input. So I think as a tradition, what we like to do is just ask each of the speakers. Of course, ETH is up, but I mean, is it back? Some think yes, some think no. But I think Orest, how would you bring ETH back if you had in like 1 or 2 sentences?
Well, I was about to say in my closing remark, whilst I think the battle is not over yet at all, I do find it so cool that you guys are organizing a space like this where we can actually talk not about price action and not about whether some token tracker happens to be red or green on this given day or quarter, but about some of the things that have this longer term effect and that might actually be helpful towards hopefully at some point converging on some better equilibrium than we would have had we not had the forum conversation in the first place. So I prefer to focus on this, and I at the same time do believe it does matter what the ticker says, unfortunately, from my perspective. And yet I do believe that the fundamentals and value creation combined with some sort of sanity in terms of incentives and pragmatism will be helpful here.
Beautiful. Thank you, Alon. Well, how do you think we bring it back?
I mean, I think that the market is hopefully recuperating. We'll see. I don't know. I'm still kind of divided if we're really going up or is just correcting and going back down again. I definitely get excited to see the excitement happening around treasury companies, Ethereum treasury companies. So that might be a big accelerant. But who knows?
Awesome. And lastly, Forrest, how would you bring it back?
Yeah, I think we're on our way. I think, again, working a lot of really cool teams, working on both sides of the dual mandate, scaling the L1, improving Ethereum mainnet itself, and then the second mandate of the rollup ecosystem. So I think we're well on our way. I try to just ignore short-term price action for my mental health and focus more about we want to see sustainable businesses being built on Ethereum. And I think that there's a lot of tooling and infrastructure out there to sustain that. So keep doing what we're doing. I don't think there's like any crazy shifts that need to be made. I think that all of the people who should have people are being heard now by like the broader Ethereum collective. So I think that the right moves are already being made, and we just need to continue to be heads down onboarding more people.
That's very much how we do it in the ETH ecosystem. 10 years of heads down, and it's got us pretty far. So I see we have one question. Let me just do this, and then I think we'll just go for the question. 2x Stake, how are you doing? Do you have a question or an opinion that you'd like to add?
Hello guys. Do you hear me?
Yes, hear you loud and clear.
Yes. Hello everyone. Great to see you all. My name is Quad. I'm Soul Staker. Please excuse me my weak English in advance. A1 level. I'll try to keep it short. And my opinion, I absolutely agree that Ethereum is a digital oil. This concept has already been strongly confirmed by institutional support. Its success is driven not only innovation and a strong community, but also by people voting with their money and showing trust. Remember that one question, one test. There is one test. For example, who was the first United States president, or who was the first in space? The first always has an advantage. With strong support and the smart use of such advantages, Ethereum can build a solid, sustainable foundation for the long term. And regarding scaling, not all aspects of human life can be processed on a single Ethereum chain. Subnets will definitely be part of the solution, like SSV also. As for corporate or alternative networks, others sooner or later they will connect back to Ethereum. It's my opinion. So yes, I truly believe Ethereum is a digital oil of the future, a new branch of the digital economic and a part of human evolution. And I feel we are in the right time and on the right side of history. Thanks.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for your wise words. Good sir on the internet. I think with that we'll close. And I see we've lost AJ and Alon, but Orest and Forrest, the cool duo that we'd have to do something again with for sure. I really appreciate you guys for joining. I appreciate the perspectives and the spicy takes, and I think it's always good to be able to debate both sides and actually get somewhere. So yeah, just from our side, really appreciate you guys for joining, and thank you for all the listeners for joining. I hope you all have a wonderful evening or day further.
Thank you for hosting and moderating. Enjoy your day.
Thanks for hosting, guys. Have a good week, everyone.
Bye bye.